Alright, and have a look at this Stihl electric chainsaw I've just bought, MSA 120C battery chainsaw. So I've using battery powered chainsaw a lot in the past. I've used my father's Makita DUC254, it's 18 volt handle on top chainsaw, so I've used that a lot and really loved that. I don't have it with me here, but I'll put a picture up on the screen. Fantastic wee device, and I've used that for brush clearing like gorse and so forth, small stuff like that, and cutting up smaller firewood, and really loved it. So I've been looking for a battery powered chainsaw for myself for a while, and I decided on this Stihl. It's a little bigger than the Makita, but a little more powerful. This one's 36 volt, and they had a deal on at the moment, 2 batteries for the price of 1, so I decided to give them a crack. So I was going to say first up that, first of all, I'm no chainsaw expert. This is what I've used in the past. I've had this for a long time. This is a 450 Rancher Husqvarna, so I'm not really a great one for being super brand loyal, but and I'm willing to try other things, but that Husqvarna has been super reliable and is a brilliant machine. Starts first pop every time. I've had that for years, so cannot fault that. I would have probably opted for the Husqvarna battery chainsaw, but they are quite a bit more expensive, so yeah, time will tell whether that was the right decision. But so I've had a chance to have a bit of a play with the Stihl now. Generally pretty good machine really, and pretty impressive what it can get through. I'll put up the video while I'm talking. I'll put up the video of me just cutting up a few bits and pieces. There's the first one is just cutting down a small tree in the yard, probably about 10 centimetre diameter, and it makes pretty light work of that. The other video following that is cutting up a plum tree stump. So some of those bits are quite big. You'll see some of those are probably 20 centimetres across, so I was pretty impressed with what it can get through, and quite quickly. Definitely a lot faster cutting than the Makita, but a little different. This one you've got to apply less pressure. A lot of it, the saw does the work for you. You don't really need to push it, and if you do push it, it tends to stall quite easily. But I wouldn't say that's a fault. It's more just the way you use it, I guess. So before I launch into talking about it too much, I'm going to point out the faults first, the things that I don't like, so that if you come here to see whether you want one or not, I'll tell you the things that I hate. And number one is this trigger design. I think is terrible. You see that's hollow on the right hand side. So as you squeeze that trigger with your index finger on your right hand, the skin gets trapped between the trigger and the body, and I find myself constantly having my skin pinched by that trigger, which I found really annoying when I first started using it. I haven't really thought of a solution for that yet, other than perhaps filling that with a bit of epoxy or something, but I thought that's a pretty major design fault. I actually wrote to Stihl New Zealand, and the guy wrote back to me. To be fair to them, they wrote back and said, well, we've never had anyone else report this, so maybe I've just got fat fingers, I don't know. But something, if you're interested in one of these, go to the shop and try that trigger out without the battery in it first and see what you think. That would be my number one complaint about this thing. The second thing I don't like is that it's single speed. Now, I need to go back and have a look on their website, but I don't believe that in the specs it really mentions that, and I just assumed that it would be variable as you pull the trigger, and you get variable speed, but it's on off. That trigger's on off, so you're either full speed or nothing, which I don't think it's the end of the world, but it was a little annoying when I've come from the Makita, which you could get quite fine control over the trigger. So another thing I wasn't overly impressed with. The only other thing I would say against it, and it's not really the fault of the saw, it's just how it is that it's a little heavier than the Makita, which is understandable. It's a bigger battery and it's a different style saw. This is a conventional chainsaw. The Makita's got a handle on top style, but this feels heavier, and the balance is obviously different. So the Makita was nice and light, easy to maneuver and manipulate. This is a little heavier. It's nothing like the bigger petrol chainsaw, but just something to be aware of course. If you're in the market, go and try a few out and hold them and see how they feel. I think this will be fine. I haven't used it a great deal yet, but yeah, I might come back and do more of a long-term review later. What else? Things that I would consider fault. Not really a fault with the chainsaw, but I was a bit disappointed when I went looking for specs for this. It's quite hard to find some of the specs on the Stihl website. I couldn't find the chain speed reported anywhere, or the power that it was outputting, and no mention of being a single speed rather than variable speed. So, whereas if you look at the Makita specs, it has all those things on their website. So I was a little disappointed in that. I was going to quickly talk about the Makita. It's not really a review of that, but the Makita DUC254, it's 18 volt, and as I said, that's a brilliant machine, and I think around a similar price to this. I would have bought one of those, but in my opinion it has one single huge design fault, in that you have to push a power button to turn it on. It's not just the trigger, and you push the power button, and then within about 5 to 10 seconds, if you don't use it, it times out. So every time you want to pull a trigger, you have to first push that power button on the top with your thumb, and then you can use the trigger. So I found that incredibly annoying, and luckily this doesn't have this problem. There's the safety on the side, so you use your thumb on your right hand with that, hold down that, and then you're good to go with the trigger. So nice and easy. The other thing with the Makita, I would say, is that the batteries didn't last very long. We had a 5 amp hour and a 2 amp hour, don't quote me on that, but neither of them lasted particularly long, so I'm looking forward to using this more. I haven't really used enough to talk about the battery life from my personal experience, but according to their specs, they should do around 120 10cm cuts, which would be pretty good if it lives up to that. And you can see what I've been doing in the videos, but that battery's still showing 100%. So this is a good design too. The battery meter nice and accessible on the top. You can push that anytime, and it's right there. Another thing about the battery design that's quite cool is it's got this 2-position battery, so battery's quite hefty. So these are 36 volt. So it's got one click and it's fitted, but it won't run. So that's in but not connected, but it's for carrying, so that won't, turn that upside down, it won't fall out. And then another click, and then you're live, you're good to go. So I like that design. So yeah, the other thing about the Makita that I didn't particularly like is that it's got a quite unusual chain, and the file size for that particular chain is a 4.5mm, which I haven't been able to find anywhere. So I'd say having an unusual chain is probably not the best thing. This here has got, I think they call it a Pico, so it's quite a narrow gauge chain, but yeah, it seems to cut well. And they sold me a file while I was down there, a 3.2mm file for that. So not your standard chainsaw file, but obviously readily available. I bought one from Stihl when I was down at the shop. What else was I going to talk about? The price. Yeah, I think the price is probably pretty reasonable for these. It seems to be in the ballpark, and the fact they were doing 2 batteries for one deal was a pretty sharp price. I have tended with the Makita to be a one-handed, sorry about that, a one-handed user, so I know this is probably a big no-no, but I quite often like to be able to hold something small and whiz through it with a chainsaw. That's something I've done regularly with Makita, and I think you can do that reasonably safely if you're a big guy. And yeah, I was hoping to be able to do a similar thing with this, but because of the balance and the weight, it's not something you'd want to do regularly. You can do it, but probably be, for your average person, it's probably pretty borderline to use one-handed. I probably wouldn't recommend that. Even though I probably will do it from time to time, it's probably not the best idea. Tension adjustment on this is great. I love this. No spanner required. You just loosen that off, then use the wheel. So I think that's a great idea. What else? I would say the service here, buying from the Stihl shop, the official Stihl shop in New Zealand. Yeah, really good service, and I feel like that if I had to take it back, I'd probably be looked after. So pretty happy with that. Haven't really got much else to say. It's pretty early days for me owning this. I'm really disappointed in that trigger design. That's probably about the only thing I'll really say. I was really impressed with its cutting ability. It's exceeded my expectations there. I think the bar length is spot on for what it is, and I'm looking forward to giving it a bit more of a workout, so I might come back and do a bit of a follow-up later. But my number one piece of advice with these would be try before you buy. If I had have had a chance to try this out for a weekend before I bought it, I might have held off and tried something different. Definitely at least go into the shop, see how it feels, try out the trigger, see what you think of the weight, and yeah, definitely if you can find someone else who's already got one, yeah, give it a decent workout, depending on what your requirements are, obviously.